Of being at a German Lutheran institution, it is now noon and we are going to start colloquium. I hope that all of you are having a good semester. Thank you, all you students. Thank you, faculty. Thank you. Thank you, Monica Church, for being here uh, to lead this art conversation. And thank you to our donor who made this programming available. Kirsten Kucher is a 70s grad from Valparaiso University who studied in the art department. She is an artist now living in Beacon, New York,
Okay.
and she has very generously made a donation that supports the colloquium art conversations for the next year. So thank you to Kirsten Kucher. Um, Without any further ado, I would like to introduce our visiting artist and leader of this art conversation. Monica and I met in about, what, 1990, something like that, at the University of Kentucky. We were both in the MFA program. Monica was studying painting and I was studying photography. We've known each other for a long time and we have watched each other grow. We've watched our artwork grow. Monica is an artist that has solid foundations in painting, in mixed media, in collage, and in photography. And she, again, earned her MFA at the University of Kentucky. And without further ado, I am going to turn all of this over to our artist, Monica D. Church. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you to the art department and to Kirsten Kucher for inviting me to visit you virtually from Poughkeepsie, New York. My talk is entitled The Before Times and Now, Making Art in 2020. I wanted to start with what turned out to be a major shift in my work after painting for over 10 years, of something that happened in the before time, what I think of as sort of there's COVID and then there's the before time, but then I realized that really there was a before time. And that before time was 9/11. Up until that point, my life had been going just as I had imagined. I was teaching, I was painting, it was terrific. However, I was home with my infant watching the Twin Towers burn, and we were able to go outside and we could see the smoke from the Twin Towers from New York, from where we live. And it was really frightening. And what kind of went through my mind at that time was, I'm a non-objective painter. I paint abstractly. My work doesn't reference anything. And, is what I'm doing really like frivolous? Am I like navel gazing? It really caused me to think about what I wanted to do. And so that was sort of a catalyst to have me shift mediums and move away from painting into other mediums. I started doing research in public health and using photo-based imagery. I started out not with my own imagery, but with finding imagery that I would then digitally work with to add sort of content to my work that was more accessible to viewers. So I'm going to show you just a body of work that I did at that time, and you'll see why it's relevant. So one thing you need to know is my husband and I have been traveling to Vietnam since 1989. And in 1997, after making photos in a local wet market, we were eating a chicken dinner in Hong Kong. And the news broke about bird flu. There was an outbreak in Hong Kong. And immediately the government started culling chickens. So that was kind of a creepy experience to have. And so we, of course, just had to deal with, that was before that bird flu had gone from birds to humans. That hadn't quite happened yet, but it made us, because we traveled back and forth to Vietnam so much, really pay attention to what was happening. Especially when SARS outbroke, there was an outbreak of SARS in Hanoi. So anyway, this is an article that I read called Greetings Kill, Primer for a Pandemic. And it was written by Donald G. McGill Jr. for the New York Times. And He muses about how Americans must learn to rewrite the way we interact. This is in 2006, I should say. McNeil's article had me seriously thinking about how I'd been affected by other pandemics such as HIV/AIDS, and the enormity of these health threats was hard for me to comprehend, and yet simple personal actions can prevent the spread of most viruses. I should add that having a small child at that time meant that I was, one, sleep deprived and constantly sick with colds and flu that she had shared with me, that her classmates had shared with her. So germs and the avoidance of germs was on my mind a lot. Our personal daily behavior becomes very important, and I am and remain kind of stunned that we're living right now and then we all understand exactly how important this is. So this is from a series, It's Not Flu as Usual. They're encaustic panels, and each has a text, an essential image of chicken feet, and a mosaic border of quail and chicken eggshells. The texts are quotes from international news stories reporting on the avian flu. They were selected for their direct, simple language, and others for their truth is stranger than fiction quality, such as the whole dead bird placed in a plastic bag should be sent to the Poultry Research Institute or the nearest maternity hospital. I think something might have been lost in translation there, but I've always thought that was really interesting. So you might imagine when you see my current work that I would be using quotes from the media and kind of pick up this thread in the current work. But unfortunately, we are living in a time when so much of what is said is really outrageous and over the top that it's overwhelming. It's not something that I'm able to pull a thread out of. So anyway, H5N1, which is what bird flu is called, became the springboard for creation of a number of works. This piece is called Washing and Wishing, and it's about nostalgia for travel, hand washing, and wish fulfillment. So I used elements in this work that for their literal and metaphorical power. So I've got suitcases, they're old, 1960s valises, and then that's ivory soap. And then these are wishbones from real chickens. And, wishbone is literally part of a dead bird. And it symbolizes the obvious that it's also a potent vehicle for transformation, the longing for wish fulfillment. Anyway, I'm much more jaded and realistic now when I think about things like this. Fair is foul and foul is fair is a series of 3 double plate etchings, and each image is a circular fragment of a chicken. The paired images without heads or feet or bodies appear human-like and suggest the delicate line between them and us. So back then, I kept thinking about McNeil's social distancing, or as he put it in his article, keeping other people's cooties at arm's length. Because influenza is more easily transmitted than AIDS, SARS, or bubonic plague, he suggested that if avian flu went pandemic, Americans, with their handshaking, kissing, and hugging, will spread an influenza outbreak like wildfire. Little did we know, right? He suggested doing what the U.S. Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention teams, or the WHO, does when they go to Africa for an outbreak of Ebola. Rather than greeting each other with a hearty handshake, the scientists simply touch elbows in a bump. So these are called double entente, and they're dealing with this elbow bump. And what they are is they're Ectocomb slides. It was the source material for these from the 1950s, and they were pinup girls. And I was interested in how when people shake hands, you get a lot of information about them. Does someone have a clammy palm? Is someone, you really like the way their hand feels? So anyway, these images are dealing with the idea of what information you can get from an elbow bump, and is it something that is at all going to be able to replace that idea of handshaking. And the work was always pinned up on the walls. It wasn't framed. And this is just a view of a number of the elbows. And ironically, not this Wednesday, but last Wednesday, this was in the New York Times. And so this is someone from the Center for Disease Control, I believe. And anyway, they're bumping elbows. And I don't know about you and your students, but during this whole shutdown and pandemic, I've only seen 2 different sets of people do an elbow bump. People felt awkward. It really isn't something that I've seen picked up. And I also think it's because we're trying to now socially distance by six feet. So, so in March, when the lockdown began, I'm gonna, right now, I should say fast forward to 2020. So anyway, I did a lot more pieces about bird flu that I'm not gonna make you watch, but or look at. So anyway, we're fast forwarding to 2020, and if someone had asked me, and they actually did, how has the current situation impacted your ability to make work, your ability to meet new clients or exhibit your work? I would have answered, and I did. My work is highly related and influenced by my ability to make photographs, collect materials, and research while traveling. A 3-week trip in March to Vietnam and Cambodia was canceled, as well as upcoming trips to Ireland, Scotland, and New Orleans, Louisiana. And the first weekend in March, I had been out at Kent State University photographing their a history conference that was commemorating the May 4th, 1970 event at Kent. And it was the first event in a series of a semester-long celebration of sort of, I shouldn't say celebration, but a memorialization of the Kent State shootings. So it was ironic for me at the beginning of 2020 to come back and have everything shut down, because I'm not sure if your students are familiar with, and you probably are, with Kent State, but it's when members of the Ohio National Guard fired into a crowd of Kent State University demonstrators, killing 4 and wounding 9 Kent State students. And the impact of the shootings was dramatic. Colleges across the campuses just closed, and people were out in the streets protesting. It was a very tense time. So when I got home, New York State had shelter-in-place orders imposed, and my college had canceled their in-person classes until April 1st. And I knew then I had to move to remote teaching. And a lot of the colleges were looking to what happened when that happened at Kent State, because nobody knew whether we needed to give grades or we needed to, what to do. And because the United States had been through something similar in terms of a national crisis relating to colleges, they were looking at what they did. Anyway, what I'm going to show you is a portfolio that I thought was going to happen, because I think that there are many things that we are not able to do, or we're not able to do because of how our world's been upended. So I was going to be in Vietnam for 3 weeks, and I wanted to finish a portfolio that I've started. And these are just snapshots taken from the very first time that I went to Vietnam, and Amy probably remembers that. And this is Hanoi, and you can just see that there's not any trash. It's very, this is before sanctions were lifted, and you can see the streets. There's bicycles, there's no cars, there's no motorbikes. It is a post-war society trying to come back or really survive until sanctions are lifted. So we'll move forward to 2014, and this is in Ho Chi Minh City, and it's something I'd never seen before. It is someone doing direct sales. It's like if you go to the fair and you go through the booths and there are people selling blenders and they're trying to entice you to come in and buy a blender, or if you go to a boat show or a home show. Well, this guy was at a stoplight. He had his wares there. He's got his mic on, and the bikes are coming in, and they're stopping at the stoplight. He gives his spiel, and then they move on and another group come through. So in any case, this group of photographs, I should tell you, is just a loose group of photographs that I was hoping that my trip would help me fill in the pieces that are missing, so that I would have a more comprehensive look at Vietnam over the past 10 years and how things have changed there. This is just a street store in Ho Chi Minh City. A lot of building has gone on, and while I was there, this is in 2014, a lot of the older buildings were being knocked down, and in their place, huge skyscrapers. So when I was first there in 1991, there was no skyline. Like the highest building might have been maybe 4 or 5 floors. And now, if you Google Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, you'll see that there are skyscrapers with 100 floors in them. It's pretty remarkable, but that's what was going on at this point. And there was a real shift. Hardly anybody had bicycles. I wanted to show you this piece because it really relates to work that I'm not showing you, but I'm very interested as a painter in surfaces and in found kind of still lives or things that sort of remind me of the construction of a painting. This is in Ho Chi Minh City, it's Blue Line. And this image is what you would see in 2014 on the walls. There was no graffiti. And I should say that up until 2004, there wasn't any graffiti anywhere in Vietnam. And there were a group of young people, young artists in Hanoi in 2006, I think, who are credited with being the first people to go out and make graffiti. And they had seen MTV videos and they saw painting on walls and they thought, oh, we want to do this. And so they started that and started to go out and tag things. And when they get called in by the police didn't have any laws in the books against graffiti. And they would fine them the equivalent of $12 and then make them clean up the wall. And they called it, what did they call it? It's basically like a littering or dirtying the wall was what they would say. And now, of course, I don't know what the penalty is for graffiti. But what you would see, these are phone numbers. And the phone numbers are for concrete companies. So what they want is the person who owns this building to see their number, to call them, to knock down the building so they can build new property. These next few images are just sort of notes for me as a painter. I'm not sure how they succeed as photographs, but I'm really interested in, like I said, surface, and this relates directly to collage work that I make. So once again, you can see the numbers. They're screening, you know, they've got stencils and they're screening these everywhere. And this is now, this was 2018, and now there's starting to be graffiti everywhere. And this is in Ho Chi Minh City, and very much, to me, this is so fascinating that these disparate pieces are all being put together visually, you know. So this is a temporary wall. So a lot of the graffiti is happening on temporary walls. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the Propeller Group, but it's a group of artists, Tuan Andrew Nguyen, who is an American Viet Q, and two other artists, one who's based in Hanoi. When you think of Vietnam, many of you may think of the Vietnam War, and they were tired of their country being referred to only in terms of war. And so they are using graffiti as a means to bring Vietnam in people's consciousness to a different level, so that when you think of it, you think of Vietnam, you don't think of the war, you think of this international art scene where graffiti artists are coming in and tagging and doing stuff, and they're making videos of street artists and putting them out there. So I thought that was also really fascinating. So, Rots was a young man who tagged a lot in like 2016, 2017, 2018, and my understanding is he's not tagging much there anymore. And if you have been to any major cities, you would recognize that BNE was here. This, let's see, this little tag. He's an anonymous street artist who tags things and puts these things up all over. He's believed to be based in Manhattan. You can see there's more than just graffiti in the portfolio. This is from Hoi An, and this is just a woman who's younger than myself. I'm in my 50s, and in her home, and she let me photograph it. And once again, I think I was drawn to her space because of the surface of the walls and the color of the walls. This is also in Hoi An, and Hoi An is in the middle of the country. You might have heard of China Beach, where soldiers would go for R&R, and it was a place that Hoi An was never bombed. So there's a lot of older buildings, and I do know that if you get caught tagging there, you are shamed terribly because it's a UNESCO World Site. So this is also showing new building. In Hanoi, now we're moving north. These are pothole covers in the city. This is a section of town where I was talking about earlier, the Propeller group was encouraging people to do graffiti. So these are not Vietnamese artists. This group happens to be from Rotterdam. But in my mind, I didn't expect to see so much the growth of graffiti over the past 10 years because it's a socialist country. So it's been fascinating. This is in Hanoi as well, and this is outside of people's kitchens, or if you have a shop, often you wash up outside. You don't wash up inside. You have an outdoor kitchen. So this is an outdoor kitchen. And this is at the Temple of Literature. Once again, I'm attracted to the surface quality of the water on the ground versus the dry steps. So that's the project that did not get finished. So anyway, I was sheltering at home in Poughkeepsie starting March 14th with my daughter, who's 19, just about the same age as some of you, I think. She's a sophomore. And two 17-year-old cats and one black Labrador and my husband. And in the beginning, I'm sure many of you felt the same way. I was unable to do much more than prepare meals and clean and organize grocery orders and sort of shakily navigate the transition to long distance teaching. So these photographs are from daily walks in my neighborhood in the city of Poughkeepsie South Side. And I started photographing here in 2008 when I started to actually learn how to take photos and realize that it was a medium I wanted to work in. And I really rely on travel photography and being a way to be stimulated. But with the lockdown, I needed to re-look at how I was seeing the area I live in. And in many ways, it was a wonderful, and still is a wonderful thing that's happened. This was the day that all of the city parks closed and workmen went out almost in synchronicity. They all went out at the same time, and they closed all the parks at once with the yellow tape and the orange fencing. This is just something that appeared on a neighbor's lawn, and my husband and I could not figure out what it was, but to me it was fascinating that whatever they're doing, they were really, really, I don't know. We have a lot of deer, but if you looked at their garden, there were many things that the deer would eat, and there was really nothing in here. But I thought it made an interesting photograph. And while I have written Executive Raised Ranch with Petite Virgin, when I see this house, I always think Tiny Mary, because Mary is so tiny. And this is just for Cynthia, a garage for Cynthia. And then, of course, we all know George Floyd was murdered, which was really horrible. And up until that point, oops, sorry about that. I hadn't been outside the house, really. We were getting our groceries delivered. So, and I should say, I was having a hard time making anything. And the protest in Poughkeepsie was on June 2nd. And I decided to go and photograph. And our city is 4 square miles. It is located 75 miles north of Manhattan. And it's the last stop on the Metro North Line. And it's a place that has had a lot of trouble kind of getting its act together. However, over the last few years, Poughkeepsie's gained a lot of momentum, and people have successful businesses, and people do not want others coming in and agitating and creating any problems. So there was a lot of tension at this march, this protest called We Can't Breathe. And a lot of police presence, but the businesses downtown, many of them were Black owned. They boarded up their windows and they put signs and everything so people would know in case it got ugly. And I'm happy to say it did not get ugly. I've met these three and they were terrific because I actually didn't know about their business. They do an international shipping business and they were terrific. So that was a silver lining for me. And this is Main Street as protesters are marching by. So I did go to a few more protests. This was when President Trump went and spoke to the cadets at West Point. There were 2 protests at the same time. And one of them, which this photo's from, was every 10 feet, there were people positioned because they wanted to be socially distanced who had protest signs. and the other one was farther down and was much more vocal. This was after the protest. And there was, what was ironic was we did not, of course, see Trump. There were drones overhead, but there was very little police presence. So it was interesting. And then our city has a new jail that's about to be built. And it turns out that because of some laws that passed, our current jail, which has just under 200 cells, or capacity for people, I guess, were not full. So there was a protest to get them to not move forward with this and to put all of that money into social programs. And this is just a couple that was a mom and son who were outside of the Dutchess County Courthouse where the meeting was going to be held. And unfortunately, they voted yes. So we will be getting this 300-bed new jail. So anyway, now I want to show you how I kind of survived and connected, or am surviving, by connecting with artists from the inside. And I don't know, Amy may be familiar with this group. It's called the Postcard Collective. And their mission is to build and maintain a network of individuals who seek to share their art with each other in the form of postcards, to open up a direct line of communication between artists and to promote a sense of camaraderie and connectedness through the collective. So the great thing is, this is something that uses the U.S. Postal Service. And I actually joined the collective in the fall, so before any of this happened. And what they do is, if you're accepted to be part of one of their exchanges, they give you a prompt, and then you make a piece in reaction to the prompt, and then everyone else does the same thing, and then you just put them in the mail to each other, so that you end up getting 30 or 40 piece postcards in the mail, and everyone else gets postcards. So I went into my archive because the prompt was that one time, and I probably wouldn't have used this image for anything except Instagram, but to me, it really worked with that one time, because it's the time I became obsessed with why there was an apple on the ground in this alley locked behind the chain link fence, which I still am obsessed with, because there are no entries, there's no like doors in this alley. It's just was this beautiful apple. So, and then this was the next Postcard Collective, which went out just before we knew what was happening, called On Your Mark, Get Set. And this image is from an analog photo I took in Manhattan at a Veterans Day parade. So the image that you saw on the poster advertising this talk is from the current Postcard Collective, and that just went out for summer 2020. And this one, the prompt was 10, and they wanted it to be 10 because it's their 10th anniversary. They have this online archive that they've also maintained that shows all of the work that's been submitted by all of the artists. And they had some restrictions on this one. They didn't want anyone to do anything political in relation to what was happening in the country or in the world, or anything about COVID. So I realized that I didn't want to just find something that fit the prompt. I wanted to make something that had been touched, and that would go to someone else that would be in their hands, because I really was feeling isolated and I had so enjoyed the other ones. But anyway, what I came up with was, I used to teach using these postcards that were from the Louvre, of famous paintings, just to talk about composition. And some of them had been mailed and some of them hadn't. So some had stamps, some had addresses, some had notes. And I went through using press type. And I'm not even sure if your students know what press type is, but it's, it used to come on these, oh, shoot, I should have brought some over to show you, but I don't. But it's basically all of the letters of the alphabet and numbers, and you would like use it on gallery walls, or you'd use it in graphic design. And it's, I don't even know if it's made anymore, but I have like, I've hoarded what I have because I use it a lot in my work. So anyway, I just went with the word 10, and then I blocked it everybody's face and painted it iridescent, and then had fun with it, and then sent all these out. So it was nice. And what most artists do is they'll include their website. So when you receive something in the mail, and the very first piece I got was really a piece of art. I was very moved to get something so beautiful in the mail. And 1,600 pieces of mail went out during this last Postcard Collective exchange. And I was doubly thrilled about that because of supporting U.S. Post Office during these times. So, and I'm not going to show you all 40. One of the nice things that happened, and I don't know if this has happened for any of the artists who are watching, but basically I was invited to be part of a virtual international show, which I probably wouldn't have been able to be part of because I wouldn't have been able to ship or get my work or show anything large if we were not under the situation we're in now. But this is for a curator named Jen Zhou, invited me to be part of it, and it is the second International Feminist Art Exhibition. The first one was in brick and mortar space, and this one was in just virtual space. And this is a collage on paper. It's 59 by 49 inches, so it's quite big, and it's called Pronouns. So I have my personal pronouns on there, and there are 2 other pieces in progress with him, her, him, his, and they, their, them. So, so that was kind of a silver lining for me to do something like that. And then my community stepped up. Barrett Arts Center did a community-sustained art project, which is based on community-sustained agriculture. And this is not a new idea because I've heard of other places doing this, but Tom Barrett, who founded Barrett Arts Center, was an artist who was part of the federal art program during the Works Progress Administration in the 30s and received money for making murals and for working locally. So the board of directors at Barrett decided to invite 9 artists to make work, and that work would be sold as a share. So if you were a member of the community, you could log on and you could buy a share just like you'd buy a share for a farm thing. And so for a few $100s, they'll get 9 original pieces of artwork from 9 different artists. So in October, that will help happen. But it was a great excuse to do something that was sort of part of the community, supporting the community, and sort of outside myself and outside the art world. And what I chose to do, because I could have done something political, but I decided not to, I really reconnected because I also should say, I was getting paid to do this. And there's something that happens when you're paid for your work, which is really wonderful. So I decided to go back to my roots and where I was before, in the before times, to non-objective painting. And in 1989, I had made a painting using this gray, blue color and black and red and green. And so I decided to do variations on that. So that these are some of these, they're small works on paper. I think the paper is like 10 by 12 or something, and then the images are smaller than that. And it was just, I have about, I think 15 more to go. Everything's due October 1st. We had to deliver half of it in August. So the other thing that they did was they split up the payment, which was really wonderful. So I encourage you guys to think about doing something like this. It's been a good experience for me. And the other lovely thing is all of the other artists agreed to make additional shares so that each artist is now going to get a share as well. So now this is sort of what I'm working on currently, my new work. And like I said, I sort of had this crisis in painting, and being part of this after time has really brought me back to painting. This is called Gold Swift, and all of these paintings are kind of connected to butterflies, which may sound a little, I don't know why. I'm not corny, but because of what the material is, flight is important, or movement is important, and structure is important. So this is, these are old sails. My husband is an avid sailor, and we bought an old clunker boat, and it came with 17 extra sails. And so I didn't have any access to canvas. I have like old things, but I really wasn't able to go buy any. Right before the lockdown, our local art store closed. So I suddenly had all this great material to work on. And this is a piece of sailcloth that's been pulled over linen and then painted on. And butterflies, as you probably know, are symbols for resurrection, the soul, endurance, and hope. And this is a different type of sail. This is called Adonis blue, and I'm not going to read the Latin name, but I'm really interested in the structure of sails and how sails move things, but also what happens when you take just a piece of the sail and work with applying color. So this is peacock, another type of butterfly. And I wanted to show you making how I kind of came up with the compositions. This is my backyard. And I just laid the sails out, and I had stretchers, and I would go through and move them around till I found something that I liked. And then I numbered all of my stretcher bars, and I cut out the pieces and I numbered them, brought them to the studio, and I've been stretching them as needed as I go along. But I have a lot more work to do, and I'm having so much fun mixing color and making these images. I'm interested in how the surface works and how the transparency versus opacity works. This is an untitled piece. This is one of the earlier ones I made. It's not on as expensive a sail as the Kevlar and carbon fiber sails. This is untitled, and you'll see these are all, you know, kind of bigger, 3 feet across by 4 or 5 feet tall. And this is the last body of work I'm going to show you. And I'm really kind of showing you notes. This is not, none of it's finished, but because Poughkeepsie's undergone so much transformation and I'm here now, I'm not traveling, I am going back into my archive and finding sites that I'm going in and rephotographing. And what is going to happen is in June of 2021, I'm going to do an installation in the city of Poughkeepsie, which will have a picture from the early 2009 to 12, and then a current photo from a year from 2021 to right about now of these spaces. And then there'll be a scan code, which will give a history of the space, if there is a history of the space. And they'll be put on street signs, not street signs, but like, you know, the yard signs or some sort of thing, and they'll be put outside so that people will be given a map and they'll be able to go through the city and they'll be able to see these spaces and how they've transformed. Because we're so close to Manhattan, we're in a huge house grab. Our city is gentrifying like crazy, it's radically changing. So anyway, this is Kmart in like 2009, and this is Kmart in January. This is Kmart in March. And now this Kmart sign, the Kmart is gone, and this entire shopping center is completely empty, completely gone. And this is the former New York State Hospital. If you've ever watched The French Connection, the movie with Gene Hackman, he talks about picking his toes in Poughkeepsie. This is where you would have been picking your toes. So it's a state mental hospital. This was taken in January. And this was taken in August. And this was taken in September. So I'm not sure what state it's going to be in next year. So, and this is the last image I have for you. And this is the shadow cast by the Snoop's Boxing Gym sign in Poughkeepsie, New York. This is a huge trolley barn. This building has been there for over 200 years. We used to have a trolley line, and in the past 5 years, it was purchased. It's been renovated. It now looks like Matthew Mark's Gallery in Manhattan. It's got an arts organization in there that caters to high school students who are gifted in the arts, and also high school students who just don't have access to the arts. So the whole thing is transformed. But the very last thing they removed was this sign that had these great boxing gloves on it. It was a big box sign. And it's gone now. So I'm going to go back and photograph this site without the shadow. And just wanted to leave you by saying that COVID-19 has forced me, and probably many of you, to reevaluate your art making practices. At least it's forced me to do that. And I'm painting again, and it's non-objective, so I'm very happy about that. And I learned that while non-objective work may not spark international discussions or make people aware of things they should be, thinking about, it's connecting to other people that's become very important during this pandemic for me. And what I've decided and what I've been doing is, in terms of trying to be engaged in what's going on in the world, because we seem to be getting hit constantly with something new, horrible that's happening, is that I'm now that person who puts lawn signs out with my political opinion on them, and I'm attending marches, and I'm donating money to things. For example, Scientific American just endorsed for the first time ever a presidential candidate, and they endorsed Biden. So I subscribe to Scientific American today, something I never would have let myself do, but I'm really looking forward to getting Scientific American now. And anyway, I want to encourage all of your students and each of you to vote, and that I want to wish each of you the ability to find meaningful art making during this troubling time. So I thank you for listening, and I'm happy to have any questions, of course. I'll unshare my screen.
Thank you, Monica. That was awesome. Thank you. For everybody that's in the audience, please, if you have questions, just hit the unmute button and state your question, or you can type in the chat portion of the Zoom, and I will read those questions. So we've got about 15 more minutes left in this time slot. So go ahead and bring about any questions about her artwork, about Monica, about any of this stuff.
You can also make comments if you don't want to ask a question as well.
Well, Monica, I'll make a comment. I really enjoyed, the spatial construction of your work. And thank you for showing us that process, through your photography and your travel. Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry.
I can hear you.
Yeah, through the process of your travel and sights and sounds and probably smells of the places that you visited, how that translates into your work, especially your non-objective painting and also collages. I did look at some of your work online earlier, and I thought it was really interesting. I made some notes.
Thank you.
My observations at that time when I looked at it, I did stress the spatial construction of your picture planes. I thought was really interesting in terms of this relationship of foreground, middle ground, background, and non-objective and objective spatial relationships. And I think a lot of people forget about that in terms of the fundamentals of making art. So I was really excited to see that and to see the process, your thinking, your experiences and how they translate back into your work.
Thank you. I think you could probably thank Hans Hoffman. I don't know. That's,
Oh.
I was really indoctrinated, and
Yeah.
I think the way he thought and taught about making things has really stayed with me. So I really appreciate that you noticed that. So I don't know if people are familiar with Hans Hoffman. If not,
Push and pull, right, Monica? Push and pull.
push and pull, yes.
Right.
So yeah, The Search for the Real is really a nice little essay to read. And anyway, I highly recommend it. But thank you for noticing that.
Other questions or comments? Please just unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Monica, this is Liz. I, like you, am a traveler. My soul calls for it. And so a lot of my artwork has been, I certainly do local artwork, but has been on my travels. And so I wonder what you're thinking about this, because it's something I often think about, the difference between photography and art that's tourism or voyeuristic or kind of an exoticism of the place that you're in, and then art making in that place. And as a second question, now that you're more rooted and back to the local, how does it feel similar or different from your travel work?
Those are really good questions and things I spent a lot of time thinking about, especially given how much I've been learning about myself in basically my white privilege. I've been trying to do a lot of reading, and I was able to go in 2014 on Semester at Sea. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So basically, you know, I traveled around the world, and you get off the ship in all these different countries, and you have like maybe 10 days, and I was working, taking photos, but in retrospect, I am very uncomfortable with some of the photos I took because I've never been able to figure out if I was doing street photography, travel photography, and the ethics of that. Vietnam, I feel a little different about, only because I've spent really big chunks of time there. So you know, we have friends there. We've spent 2 or 3 months at a time living there, and the same with Ireland, although that's not really the same thing. But I do know that I think we have to be really careful about exoticizing our subjects, and I think it's a really fine line. I know that I was shifting more towards making collage, collecting materials, and working tactily and non-objectively to do that. And I don't have a good answer for you, except I also was looking to photojournalists to see what they're doing or how they're handling things. And I think for me, the one thing that I wasn't doing when I started, and I should say I'm new to photography as of really 2008, 2009, was trying to engage the people that I'm photographing so that they become obviously part of the story in a way that, you know, I hadn't before. And in some ways that's really hard when you have limited time and you're just moving through a space and you're reacting to things. But I think it's something that we all need to really consider. Did I answer that question, or what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, now that you're going out with your camera locally, how is that similar or different?
Well, I have to say that it's not as much fun. You know, I really miss the stimulation of, I think one of the things about travel that I love is that I'm also away from the familiar in all ways. So like, I'm not having to worry about my bills. I'm not having to worry about my dishes. I'm not having to worry about all these things. I'm just kind of, you know, able to experience a lot of stuff and have a lot more head time for myself when I'm out there with my camera. And my camera forces me to look more. So I noticed locally that if I have my camera with me, I am looking more and I'm forcing myself to look. I am enjoying doing this kind of rephotographing thing because it's really specific. And the one thing I haven't been able to do is actually go out with the prints. Like with prints, I've had to go out kind of from memory, photograph things. So I need to do that. You know, I think it's what I have. So I've got to kind of make it work. And I think the other hard part about photographing locally for me is when I'm traveling, I get up early and I go do things. And when I'm at home, it's really easy to get caught up in my routine and not go take photos. So if I'm going to seriously continue making photos, I'm going to have to really get serious about a structure where I'm going out specifically at times when it's a good time to take a photograph, not just coming across to photograph. So that's something I've been thinking about. But yeah, I think it's a real tricky thing. Graffiti is a thread that I've been following, and renovation and transformation more than sort of the people. So that's another way I've sort of dealt with stuff, is I'm not taking a lot of photographs of people if I don't have the time to engage with them or talk with them or spend time with them. So a very long-winded answer.
Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. Hi.
Hello. My name is Jade. I have a question concerning where was your primary interest for those original works, the abstract ones? I mean, where was your primary inspiration for the original abstract ones you used to do?
Oh, that used to. That's a great question. A lot of different things. One was a lot of times it was based on literary readings. I read a book called Sea of Tranquility by Paul Russell, which is about a lunar landing, the first lunar landing, and about astronauts. And so I was obsessed with the moon. So I did a series of paintings based on, after reading that book, about the different, they were all named for different areas of the moon, Sea of Tranquility being one of them. Also early in the 2000s, after I had my daughter, and I have to say, I swear I would never do this. I know it sounds really corny, but I was always really negative against people who, once they have a baby, their work changes, blah, blah, blah. Well, I had a baby and my work changed, blah, blah, blah. So I was that person that I had been very judgmental of. But after I had my daughter, I did a lot of work, probably about 6 years worth of paintings based on my experience with her. They were non-objective, but they were, for example, I was making one painting and I couldn't figure out where this new shape came from. And, I finally, I'm doing this painting and the palette's very different. It's a lot of pinks and reds, and I'm still not quite sure where it's come from. And it turns out that it was her potty chair. She had a Dora the Explorer potty chair, and it was that shape. But I had spent so much time getting this kid and putting her on this potty chair that came out in the work. I know it sounds funny, but it was in my subconscious, and that it transformed that shape. So also Vietnamese poets, a lot of poetry. It inspires stuff as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking it.
I was going to, I have so many questions. The first one that I wanted to talk about was, where was I? So the idea of you going from photography to something more tactile. I noticed that you mentioned in your postcards that you recently sent out that weren't supposed to be political or about the pandemic. You mentioned that the idea of having something physical was very, very much still about the pandemic, I think, right? Just having that personal connection. And so I'm wondering if the paintings in some way, since you've been closed off to some of these connections that you've been able to make with other people, the handshakes, the aspect of the textures and the just living out in the world and connecting with people, if that's, well, I can't see how it couldn't be part of it, part of the drawback to the paint and back to the,
Right.
yeah.
I for years have made collage, and I didn't show you any of that. And I should say, when I'm traveling, I'm making collage like diary entries. I make at least one a day from garbage that I find, which unfortunately has gotten less safe as time has progressed. The city I live in, I had to be careful because of possibly stuff being contaminated with fentanyl, for example. So I have sort of stopped doing that. But I also think that the tactility of paint is something that is really, it's a visceral thing. But I also think that it's me also becoming comfortable again with myself, and not having to, there's a huge filter now, I feel, in the art world that I feel comfortable not actually being engaging in. Mm-hmm. Whereas I kind of felt before I was like, trying to get work out there and trying to make something that was gonna, I don't know what. And that's something about this period of time where at the beginning I was unable to work, and now I'm kind of gone back to where I started, and I'm so enjoying it, and it's very much, they're not works I think that are going to set the world on fire, but that they really are about some one person looking at them, which is where I started way back when, was wanting to have that experience, because that's what I used to love, was seeing a painting and a Bryce Martin and sitting in front of a Bryce Martin painting and just so enjoying that experience. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that's part of it as well.
Yeah, and I imagine that, like when you said something about how you don't use quotes from the news anymore because things are just too absurd.
Yeah.
You know, it takes a real artist to draw the absurd out of reality, but when reality becomes more absurd, then it almost becomes bad subject matter.
Yeah, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can't do it because, I mean, I do. I think it takes just the right person, and I think a lot of artists are doing that. But I really,
Mm-hmm.
I sort of really recoiled from it because in the beginning I was photographing, and I started with the election. I did a piece that was photographing, Trump's hands in his. I was doing screenshots of Trump's hands at the inauguration. Because I thought this would happen. And then every time he'd talk, I'd take photos and I thought I'd do something of my screen. And I'm like, you know what? I just can't look at it. I can't do it. It's not going to make one bit of difference. And it's just going to make me really sad or upset and I think that there are some really talented people out there who work with political content who it just comes much more naturally to. So, yeah.
Hey, Monica and Amy. Can I sort of try to encourage a couple more students to chime in? I'm looking at the names on our Zoom screen here, and I see some students' names like, I'm gonna just call her out, Anna, because you have worked with mixed media before, found objects before. Do you have any questions for Monica? What is the connections, to this particular guest artist? And any of your work, so I would like to encourage the students to speak up. This is a privileged opportunity to have a guest artist in your presence, whether Zoom or whatever, and to chime in, to have a discussion, a conversation with this person. So who would like to chime in before we have to sign off?
Barlow, I'll definitely chime in. I was kind of getting my thoughts together, but
Kayla?
since you want to bully people, it's fine. Hi, Monica. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Why,
I'm good. So something I found really interesting was like since you weren't able to travel, you started looking around your neighborhood in your home, and I feel like that's something I've been able to connect with because I've been inside for like the past couple of months. So coming outside, I'm like, wow, life is so good. So like besides your neighborhood, how are you exploring more since you can't really travel outside of the country? Like how are you expanding this?
That's a really good question. And I did want to say, I don't know if you all noticed at the beginning when everyone couldn't go anywhere, our pollution level went down so low that my eyesight improved. When I went outside, I could see things better because we just didn't have all the crap in the air. Sadly, it's coming back. What I'm doing is when I see a place that I want to photograph locally, and I'm really not going very far. I mean, like I said, the city of Poughkeepsie is 4 square miles, and I'm sort of staying here. I'm paying attention to buildings and spaces that are being renovated or knocked down, and we have a number of them. Like we have an old YMCA. So I've made note of those spaces, and I've purposely gone to that space and photographed, and then I'm going to purposefully go back until I get a photograph that's actually interesting. So that's how I've been doing it, because in the past I would just go for walks and see what I came upon. It was really kind of organic, but because now when I need a break and I need to get out in the world, I feel like I need a destination. And even if the destination is this block that was like right now, there's a space I need to go see. I've been photographing. It's a block in the 500 block of the city of Poughkeepsie Main Street. And it was, when I first moved here, believe it or not, there was a serial killer that was there. And it was this crazy story. So I've always been familiar with this block, and someone has purchased it. And I have lots of photos of the building itself with like the big X's on it, and, things boarded up and whatever was in there before, which was a lot of kind of unsavory shops. And so now the last time I went past, it's been completely redone. So I'm going to go and rephotograph that space with it all shiny and gentrified, and maybe talk to some of the people who live around there and see what they're thinking, because I'm assuming that space is going to going to be rented to people who are not from Poughkeepsie, who are newcomers here. So, but I think that's a really wonderful thing. Now, are you a photographer as well?
No, I like the beauty of nature sometimes. So it's been really good to like, it's really refreshing to see things like with a new lens. Like, oh, it's so good to be outside and like see things are changing, things look different now.
Exactly. We actually now have a coyote in our neighborhood. That's been the excitement.
Ah.
Not that I'm a nature photographer, we're going to take pictures of it, but that's been, you know, we've got this weird wildlife thing happening, which is good.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much.
thank you for your question.
Are there any other questions that this group would like to bring up before we adjourn?
I had a quick question.
Go ahead, Carly.
Oh, hello, hi. So I was wondering, with your series on the bird flu pandemic or H1N1, I saw that you had some like glass around. The word's not coming to me right now. Like in the frame, I was just wondering your process about that. Around that.
Are you thinking of the, did you see work on my website, or are you talking about the work I showed today?
The work that you showed today.
Okay, the first ones that had the kind of collage on the outsides?
Yes.
Okay, that's actually an encaustic medium, and those are bird eggshells. So what I did, yeah, so it's wax, and I collaged into the wax, and then I don't know if you've ever used encaustic, but you put a heat gun and you put it over the wax, and it melts and smooths everything in, so you have this beautiful surface. So it's got a kind of a reflective quality. So does that answer your question?
Yes, I was wondering, did you like place the image in and then build the frame around it, or did you, like, I was just wondering like which one you did first?
Okay, so basically those are wood panels, and on top of the wood panel there's a piece of like Bristol board that I've glued down with PVC glue, and then on top of that is a photocopy of a scanned, I don't know if you can see this, these are player cigarette cards. I'm going to hold this up to the mirror, to the camera. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, this is the source material for a lot of that work. And these are what you would get with a cigarette. This is in Britain. They're British little cards. So anyway, I scanned those digitally, and then I made circles out of them, and then I printed them out. And because I'm using encaustic, when you encase any kind of paper in encaustic, it doesn't age. So it's not going to turn yellow. So you can kind of, with collage, using collage and encaustic is great because it doesn't change. It just doesn't turn yellow or anything. You don't have to worry about the pH of the paper. And then I had eggs, and I would sit down. So that would be glued down. There's a layer of, before that, I should say, I have an old typewriter that belonged to my mom in the 40s, and I would hand type these quotes onto it, you know, and so that would be the piece of paper that would be glued on top of the Bristol board, and then I would cover it in caustic and then collage the eggshells around it and then seal it with the heat gun. Make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Those are beautiful. I really appreciated your talk and your work, by the way.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you listening. Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just wondering, with your travels around the world specifically, you said that you've traveled to Ireland and Vietnam. Do you have any ideas where you might travel in the future once the pandemic allows?
Oh yeah, I have a bucket list, but I think first and foremost is the Shetland Islands. My husband turned 60 during the pandemic, and we had a trip to the Shetland Islands planned to celebrate his birthday. And he was pretty sad to have a Zoom birthday party as opposed to being in the Shetland Islands. And because I spent a year living in Dublin, I definitely want to go back to Dublin. And of course, I have to finish this project in Vietnam. My husband, I should say, is a scholar of the war, so that's one reason that I know that I'll be traveling back there if we're ever able to travel. And then I also hope to travel within the States more. That's one thing. I feel like there's a lot of places that I'd like to see in the United States, so we'll see if that happens. So, Cambodia, actually, too. I'd never been to Cambodia, and I really wanted to go there. Although I have to say, after with what's happened politically there, I'm not sure I can go to Cambodia, because if I go there, it means my money will be going to people that I wouldn't want to give money to, people in the corrupt politicians, or not politicians, but people in the government who would own places where we'd be staying. So I may not be traveling to Cambodia, because I think it's really important to be aware of who's getting the money, who's getting the tourist money. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Do you have any tips on how to make like non-objective artworks or abstract artworks? I always have an issue breaking out of perfectionism, and I've been trying to do things a little bit more subconsciously, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the important thing is usually it takes two people to make a piece, at least when you're starting out, and that's someone to tell you when to stop, because you can kill something by reworking it. But I think for me, what's helpful, especially because of re-engaging and doing something that's a multiple and small, is to do something where you're giving yourself a stretch of time, like maybe 4 or 5 hours, and you have a stack of paper, and you have limit your materials, and just shut yourself off with no rules. Just start working and go through these things. They don't have to be complicated. I think Robert Motherwell in the 60s did 100 drawings or more than 100 ink drawings on paper in 24 hours to sort of break out of a block he was having. But I think when you're working on objectively, it's that you really kind of need to have time and space, and you have to also not have pressure to make anything. I mean, you might make some crappy things, but then all of a sudden something might start to happen. I do think giving yourself some parameters in terms of limiting what you're working with will help you use what you're working with in ways you hadn't anticipated. So the other thing would be, just another thought is also working in collage is a wonderful way. When I'm talking about collage, I'm not talking about cutting things out of a magazine. I'm talking about, going for a walk around your block and picking up all the garbage you find that is made of paper and is not nasty, and coming home and having that be the material that you work with. Just keep moving it around and seeing how it relates to each other, and think of how the edges connect and what happens when you put these two things together, and then maybe tearing this one smaller, and maybe let yourself use some colored pencils to add color to whatever you're doing. So anyway, those are my thoughts off the top of my head. But I think if you have an interest in it, you will find your way. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Students, any other questions?
I have more of a comment, really. I was interested in your sort of time exploration photographs of buildings, because as soon as I saw the Kmart sign, I was reminded of a Kmart that is very close to me, to where I live, that I kind of watched go through the phases of being open and having their final sale, and then getting shut down, and now the building is gone entirely. And looking at your photographs kind of made me wish I had gone and taken pictures before and after that happened. So that was my comment.
No, it's a good comment. And I regret not taking more pictures of buildings, because once it's gone, it's gone. I talked about the Snopes building and the Great Sign. I am the idiot that never took a picture of the sign. I took a picture of its shadow, but, and I know the people who own the building, so I actually know where the sign is, but it's not the same thing as taking a picture where it was and where it was meant to be. And, I think there's something kind of magical about seeing these transformations. Or I don't know if it's magical, but it's very moving to see
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, so just start carrying your camera with you, and then you've got a cell phone, so you can do it with your mobile.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, anybody else have a question or comment? Going once, going twice. Okay, we are going to conclude this art conversation, and I will conclude by thanking Monica D. Church, my friend, my colleague, my classmate from a long time ago. Thank you for being present. I'm clapping. The rest of you guys can clap. Thank you. It was a fabulous presentation. Also, again, thanks for the sponsorship by Kirsten Kucher. And that's a fabulous resource that is going to keep us going for a semester that's a little bit weird. So thank you again, Monica. And
Thank you, Monica.
hang on, because I'm going to talk to you
Okay.
more, or I can call you on the phone. So that concludes this event. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Mask up. And if you're going to drink beer 6 feet apart.
Thank you, Monica.
See you, everyone.
It was really nice talking with everyone. Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you so much, Amy.
That was really, really great. Once Barlow got the students talking, that was really great. And I think that was an awesome presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for getting them going. And really, Amy, thanks so much for hosting me. This is really fun. It was a great opportunity for me. And I loved seeing your face.
You know, we need to do this. Like, actually, we could do it on FaceTime on the phones, you know?
That sounds brilliant. We should set up like every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, whatever.
I think that's great. Set up a time where we just sit down and like have one thing that we show each other.
I would love that. So
Work in progress.
Yeah, because I
It
would
would
love
be
to-
like back, all we need is Marilyn Hammond.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I don't know if she Zooms or anything, but yeah, that would be, you know what?
told me, where is she?
Well, I think she is still, okay, I'm going to try to stop the video.